Hi Pisces, and welcome to your June 2024 horoscope. So, I know May and April were kind of chaotic. Honestly, we had eclipse season, we had Pluto going retrograde, we had Jupiter and Uranus conjunction, Jupiter entering Gemini. There was a lot happening. But in June, it should feel a little bit easier. This is because we have Mars entering the sign of Taurus, which should hopefully bring our actions a little bit more motivated and focused towards rest. And we also have the Sun and Venus entering the sign of Cancer. So that should also bring a little bit more of this emotional, introspective energy as well. But let's start off the month by talking about Jupiter. So Jupiter entered the sign of Gemini at the end of May. And one of the first aspects, or the first aspect it makes with this year-long in Gemini is a trine to Pluto. And I think this is such a beautiful aspect to make, especially as it's sort of its opening statement in the sign of Gemini. You know, when I think about Jupiter trine Pluto, I get this sense of the fact that most of us are more scared of our success, more scared of our own power and our own purpose than we are of failing and never achieving it, never finding out about it. I also get this idea of a lot of us have trouble letting things go, but often in order to get even better things into our life, letting go has to happen first. And these are some of the lessons that you might be thinking about at the beginning of June, on June 2nd to be exact. And specifically for you, Pisces, because Pluto is in your 12th house, there might be certain fear that you have around letting go, certain fear that you have about getting in touch with the spiritual side of you. Perhaps you're worried that when you do that, you lose control. Perhaps you're worried when you do that, people won't relate to you anymore. Whatever those fears are, Jupiter trining Pluto at the beginning of this transit is basically saying, I need you to take a look at these Plutonian lessons in order to be able to fully take advantage of all of the opportunities I have in store for you. And if you want to get a little bit more into the opportunities that Jupiter has in store for you, Pisces, I recommend watching this live that I did. I go through all of the 12 zodiac signs and what they can each expect with Jupiter and Gemini. Next, let's have a bit of a chat about Venus. So Venus is moving really fast in the month of June. She whizzes past Gemini and almost gets through like half of the sign of Cancer as well. And because of that, she's going to make a lot of contacts with different planets along the way. And you're going to hear quite a bit about her in this June horoscope. The first aspect that Venus makes is on June 3rd when she and the Sun sextile the North Node. The North Node is in Aries, and collectively it's asking all of us to do the scary things, to be courageous. And for you specifically, Pisces, Venus and the Sun will sextile the North Node from your 4th house. So there might be a sort of trigger or an origin for this courage that comes from your home or your family. You know, perhaps your family member says something that crosses a boundary and you need to stand up for yourself, to be courageous and set a boundary. It could be that something happens within your home, something breaks or happens, physically within the home that you also need to be courageous around and deal with it, even though you might be scared and you might not know what to do about it. And honestly, this is such a beautiful aspect because just a day later on the 4th, the Sun and Venus become conjunct in your 4th house. So I really see this as sort of like, no matter what you do, like the benefit is going to be amazing. If you show up, if you are courageous, even if it's scary, even if you do it while, quivering, Sun and Venus are conjunct in your 4th house. So the benefits from you showing up are going to be are definitely going to be there. So the chances that something might go wrong are a lot less slim with the Sun and Venus there. Your 4th house continues to get highlighted even more through the beginning of June. Specifically on June 6th, we have a new moon in Gemini in your 4th house. And what is interesting about this new moon is that both the Sun and Venus are getting closer and closer towards a square with Saturn. And even though the square is not exact during this new moon, it will actually be exact 2 days later. Because it's an applying aspect, it's an aspect that's getting closer, you will definitely feel that restrictive energy during the new moon. So even though you might feel like starting something new around your home, maybe a new home renovation project, or you want to start a new tradition with your family, you want to start calling your siblings or your parents every Monday, Saturn might make it more difficult to happen. Saturn might slow it down. It might put obstacles in the way of you doing so. So I would just recommend that you don't get discouraged because of this. Honestly, Saturn can get pretty discouraging. Trust me, I'm going through my Saturn return. But one thing to keep in mind with Saturn is that you can still get to your end destination. It's just you might have to get there in a different way than you originally thought. So that square with Saturn is exact on June 8th and June 9th. Venus is exactly square Saturn on the 8th, and then a day later, the Sun is exactly square Saturn. And what's really interesting about June 9th is that it's also the day that Mars enters Taurus. So while you're feeling this restrictive energy of Saturn, you're also less motivated to do things. Your motivation, it's going from the sign of Aries, which is let's go, let's get things done, to the sign of Taurus, where you might now be motivated to find silence and to take naps. So definitely keep that in mind and be kind with yourself, and just, if you want to rest, allow yourself a moment to do so. As soon as Mars enters Taurus, it squares Pluto in Aquarius. This is going to be one of the most intense days of the month of June. This is happening on June 11th. Both Mars and Pluto can be intense planets, and they also have an intense aspect between them as well, the square. So you might be feeling it, Pisces, and honestly, all of the zodiac signs might be feeling it. And specifically, there might be something with the way you're communicating, or something that your neighbors or your siblings say that trigger, again, these fears that you have around your spirituality, your feelings of fear that you have around having compassion for the rest of humanity. One way that this could manifest, for example, is your sibling says something that makes you realize that, wait a second, maybe I'm being too compassionate in this situation. Maybe I should be a little bit more strict here, set more boundaries. Maybe I'm being too spiritual and I'm being taken advantage of here. So for example, that could just be one way that this day manifests for you. But again, it might feel intense, so just be super kind with yourself. But now that we've talked about the intense planets, let's get back to something a little bit more fun. Let's get back to what Venus and the Sun are doing. By June 16th, Venus has traveled through all of Gemini. It's at the final degrees of Gemini, and it's ready to enter the sign of Cancer. But before it does that, it squares Neptune on its way out. And don't forget, the sun is literally right behind Venus, following in her footsteps. So just a couple of days later, on June 20th, the sun also squares Neptune. So around these 4 days, you might be becoming aware of all of the places you've been delusional about your own power, your own uniqueness, the way you stand out as an individual, the way you show up in the world. And, this could look in many different ways. Perhaps you've been delusional thinking like, oh, well, people don't take me seriously. People don't like to be around me. And something happens that makes you realize, wait a second, that's actually not true. I am really loved. I really have a lot of friends. I am really well understood by those around me. So that, for example, could be one way that sort of the rose-colored glasses come off and you start to really see not just who you are at the core, but more about how others perceive you, how you come off to others. Once they finish their square, both Venus and the Sun enter the sign of Cancer. Venus enters Cancer on June 17th, and the Sun enters Cancer on June 21st. Cancer is your 5th house, so from these days onwards, you might feel a little bit more focused towards having fun, pursuing your hobbies, expressing yourself, unapologetically the way a child would. And honestly, we start off Cancer season with a bang. The second day of Cancer season on June 22nd, we have a full moon in Capricorn. So the moon is in Capricorn in your 11th house, and the sun is in Cancer in your 5th house. So for you Pisces, this might mean that there is something from your network of friends, something from your communities that you belong to that reveals a piece of information about what brings you happiness, what brings you joy. If I had to give an example, it might be this idea that a friend shares a new activity that she tried and suggests that you try it as well. And that gives you a new idea and sends you down the path of an entirely new way of bringing more joy into your life, an entirely new hobby that you want to enjoy. So that could just be one way that this could manifest for you. So we're almost at the end of June, but Venus still has 2 more transits to go through, 2 more aspects to go through. On June 26th, Venus squares the North Node and the South Node. So if you remember at the beginning of June, Venus was sextiling the North Node, bringing up the themes around standing up for yourself, setting boundaries. And it will do the same now on June 26th, but this time the trigger or the origin, the place asking you for that courage is different. Whereas at the beginning of the month, you had to display some courage with your family and your home, this time you have to display some courage around your self-expression. And this could be an interesting one. You might be thinking like, okay, yeah, how would that work? But some ideas, for example, are that you want to try a new hobby that scares you, but you need to be courageous and do it anyways. That's the energy of Aries, doing the scary things. It could be that, somebody infringes upon you while doing something fun, maybe while at a party, and you need to stand up for yourself. Or somebody infringes on your fun time, on your self-expression time, saying, okay, instead I need your help or I need you to work. And again, you need to stand up for yourself and set the boundary and say, no, this is time for play and for fun. The final Venus transit is Venus sextile Mars, which happens on June 28th. Venus is in your 5th house, while Mars is in your 3rd house. all of the time that you've been putting into having fun, being diligent with enjoying your day-to-day life here on this earth is somehow making it easier for you to connect with your local community. All of a sudden you feel more in touch and in line with your neighbors and your siblings. And it's making it much easier for you to communicate in a more effective way as well, which honestly makes sense. Often when we take care of ourselves first, we're able to just become nicer humans. We're nicer to be around, and we're usually much kinder. We have to wrap up the month with a big one. On June 29th, Saturn goes retrograde. So I know, the planet saved the best for last, honestly. Saturn will stay retrograde until November, so you have quite a few months to reflect. You have quite a few months to reflect on what Saturn in your first house has been teaching you, the restriction that you have felt around the way you show up to the rest of the world. Perhaps you felt a little bit of an identity crisis, feeling like you're not understood, feeling like whenever you show up as your authentic self, others don't get you. And what Saturn has been asking of you in your first house is to continue putting in the work, to continue being disciplined, to continue exploring who you are and how you show up in the world. So honestly, reflect on that during this retrograde period, because when Saturn goes direct in November, you'll hopefully get some more chances to use your wisdom. So Pisces, I hope you're excited for the month of June. There is quite a bit of focus on your family and your home, so I highly encourage you to spend some time and energy there. And you also have, towards the second part of the month, a lot of amazing energy for play and fun. So honestly, if you're getting invited to parties, take it, take the invitation. If you wanted to pick up a hobby, do it now. The second part of the month should be hopefully a bit more fun. Thank you for joining me, Pisces. I hope you enjoy the month of June. And one more thing before you go, I'm doing a giveaway. When we reach 1,000 subscribers on this channel, I will gift one free reading to you. So make sure, if you want to enter and have a chance to win, make sure you subscribe. I hope to see you again soon.